She knocked on my hotel room door at 11 at night and said she'd forgotten her keycard. I'd worked beside this woman for 2 years, and in 2 years she had never once forgotten anything. Not a deadline, not a figure, not a single mistake I had ever made in a meeting. So I expected her to be downstairs at the front desk, demanding a replacement, cool and impatient the way she was about everything. Instead, she was standing in my doorway, holding nothing at all. No card. No reason that made sense. And it would take me most of that night to understand that a woman that precise does not lose the one thing that would finally get her away from me. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 35. I write bids for a commercial construction firm, estimates, proposals, the long, careful documents that decide who gets to build a hospital wing or a parking structure and who goes home with nothing. It is not a job people dream about as children. I'm good at it the way you get good at anything you fell into and never left. I know the work. I know my numbers, and most evenings I know the inside of my apartment better than I know anyone in it. Her name was Nora Vance. She did the same job I did, one desk pod over, which in our office meant we weren't colleagues so much as two weather systems forced to share a sky. She read proposals with a red pen uncapped between her teeth, and she carried a dented dark green travel mug into every meeting like a small shield, the rim chipped on one side from some history she never explained. She was faster than me. She knew it. She was the kind of sharp that made you check your own math twice and resent her for being the reason you were right. We met when we were hired the same week and assigned the same account by mistake. Then spent our first month arguing over a single line item until a director split the project down the middle just to make us stop. 2 years later, we were still split down the middle of everything. Rivals is the clean word for it. The honest word is that I had built an entire personality around beating her, and had told myself, very convincingly, that this was the same thing as not thinking about her. The conference was 3 days in a chain hotel 2 states away, the kind of industry event where 400 people in lanyards pretend to network while they actually just drink the free coffee. Our firm sent the 2 of us because we were up for the same promotion, and somebody upstairs apparently thought a little competition was good for morale. The lobby smelled like carpet cleaner and somebody's overdone cologne, and the air conditioning was set to a temperature that suggested management hated us personally. We checked in one after the other. I heard her before I saw her, that flat, efficient voice giving the desk clerk her name. And when the woman handed me my key, she said, brightly, that my colleague was right next door in room 412. Wasn't that convenient? Nora and I looked down at the little laminated floor map on the counter at exactly the same moment. Neither of us said a word. We are both very good at not saying things. That first evening there was a reception in a ballroom with a bad chandelier and worse wine. I watched her work the room. She was better at it than me, of course. All that sharpness turned charming the second she wanted something. Then at one point, a regional director, 3 drinks in, leaned into her and put a hand low on her back and said something I couldn't hear. And I watched her smile stay exactly where it was, while everything behind it went somewhere else. She set the green mug down on the bar too hard. I didn't think it through. I crossed the room and told the director that corporate was looking for him, which was a lie, and walked the conversation somewhere else. She didn't thank me. She just held my eyes for 1 second longer than felt safe, then looked away. That bothered me more than it should have. I told myself it was because I don't like watching anyone get cornered. That part was true. It just wasn't the whole truth, and the piece I left out was the piece that kept me awake. Back in room 402, I lay on top of a bedspread that had clearly seen things and admitted, to the ceiling, that I had not crossed that ballroom for any noble reason. I had crossed it because the sight of that man's hand on her had done something to me. I did not have a folder to file it under. I told myself it was protective instinct, the same thing I'd feel for a sister, for a friend, for anyone. I told myself I'd have done it for the intern. I told myself a great many sensible things, lined up in a neat little column the way I line up numbers, and the column refused to balance. Because protective instinct doesn't keep you up tracing the exact second a woman held your eyes a beat too long and replaying it like footage. I am a man who works with numbers, and even I could tell that one didn't add up. The room smelled faintly of the same carpet cleaner as the lobby, and somewhere down the hall an ice machine clattered awake and went quiet again. Through the wall I could hear her television, low, some late night nothing, and I lay there listening to the muffled proof that she was 8 inches of drywall away and that I was lying awake thinking about exactly that. I have poor survival instincts around women who can out-argue me. I turned off the light and decided I simply would not think about it, which is the kind of plan that has never once worked in the entire history of men. The next day rearranged things one small piece at a time. In a breakout session that morning, a man from a competing firm dismissed a costing approach. My approach, one I'd presented badly back at our office months ago, and that Nora had publicly shredded at the time. I assumed she'd enjoy watching it happen again. Instead, she raised her hand and defended it. Precisely, coldly, fact by fact, until the man ran out of things to say and sat down. Afterward, I caught her in the hall and said, "You hated that idea." She capped her pen, slid it behind her ear, and said, "I hated that you presented it like you didn't believe it. The idea was fine. The idea was always fine." Then she walked off before I could figure out what to do with my own face. I stood in that hallway holding a paper cup of coffee gone cold, replaying the words "the idea was always fine" like a man turning a coin over to check it's real. In 2 years, she had never once told me a thing of mine was fine. She told me my margins were optimistic, and my timelines were fiction, and my font was a war crime. She had never said fine. And here she defended a thing of mine to a stranger like it personally offended her to hear it dismissed. I told myself she just hated sloppy thinking. That was true. It was also, I was beginning to understand, nowhere near the whole sentence. At lunch, her phone lit up on the table between us. Screen up, a message from someone saved as Jules, and before she flipped it over, I caught the first line. "He's there with you? Did you actually?" And then she turned it face down too fast. So fast that the rest of that sentence is, to this day, the single most interesting, unfinished thought I have ever almost read. I spend my whole professional life reading documents that other people would rather I didn't. I have never wanted to read one more than I wanted to read the rest of that text. Then, the day did the one thing I had been dreading since the agenda went out. After lunch, a moderator stood up and announced that the next session would pair attendees from the same firm to walk the room through a live case study, and there are 2 of us from our firm, and so there we were. Nora Vance and Daniel Mercer, the 2 weather systems, handed a single laptop and a clicker, and told to share one stage. We had never once finished each other's sentences. We had spent 2 years finishing them as insults. But something happens when you stop being allowed to compete and are forced, in front of strangers, to build the same thing at the same time. You find out the other person was never actually the obstacle. She'd start a point, and I'd see exactly where it was going and lay the next plank under it before she got there. And she'd glance at me, surprised, and keep walking across it. We were good. We were embarrassingly good. By the end, a woman in the 3rd row asked how long we'd worked together like this, and Nora said 2 years, and the woman said it shows, and Nora didn't correct her, and I watched her not correct her, and the thing in my chest moved another inch of furniture. Off the little stage, she handed me back the clicker and said, low, so only I could hear it, "That was annoyingly easy, Mercer," and walked off before her face could finish doing whatever it had started. That afternoon, in a long, dull session on regulatory changes, I noticed she'd brought the green mug all the way from home, not the paper hotel cup stacked by the coffee urns. Her own dented mug carried 2 states in a suitcase. And I sat there thinking about a person who packs a chipped mug for a 3-day trip, because the unfamiliar ones feel wrong in her hands. And I understood something about her I had spent 2 years carefully refusing to see. She caught me looking. This time, she didn't look away. She held it. 1 second, 2. Then she wrote something on her notepad and turned it a few degrees toward me on the table. It said, "Stop staring, Mercer. People will think you like me." And under that, smaller, in a hand that looked like it had gotten away from her, would that be the worst thing? I read it twice. When I looked up to answer, she'd already turned the pad back around and was staring straight ahead at the speaker, like a woman who had just realized her own pen had betrayed classified information. So I didn't answer. Some sentences you protect by not touching them. I spent the rest of that session staring at a slide about zoning code and feeling something rearrange itself quietly in my chest. The way furniture moves in a house you thought you knew. That evening, we ended up in the hotel bar. Not together, just both there, at opposite ends. The way 2 people end up in the same place when neither of them will admit they checked first whether the other was coming. The bar emptied out slowly. A bartender stacked glasses and ran a rag along the rail. A television over the bottles played a baseball game that neither of us was watching. And at some point, without either of us deciding it, the distance between our 2 stools had narrowed to 1, and then to none, and we were sitting side by side staring up at a game we did not care about, because looking at the screen was easier than looking at each other. She turned the mug in slow quarter circles on the bar top. I watched her hands do it. I have spent my career noticing the one small detail in a document that gives the whole thing away, and I noticed that her hands were not nearly as steady as her voice always was. I didn't say anything about it. There are things you don't point at, the way you don't point at a deer in case it runs. The ice in her glass had melted to a thin, clear layer she wasn't drinking. The bartender's rag squeaked along the rail and stopped. On the television, a man hit a ball into a sea of people, and 40,000 strangers stood up at once, and the 2 of us sat very still under it. The only people in the building not moving, holding a silence that had weight to it now. That pressed down on both of us like a hand on a shoulder that for once nobody minded. When she finally spoke, she didn't look at me. She said, "I asked the front desk to put me next to you. Then, before I could move, I told myself it was so I could keep an eye on the competition." She turned the mug another quarter turn, watching it instead of me. "That's a lie, by the way," she said. "I just didn't have a better one ready." The bartender called last orders. Neither of us ordered anything. We sat in it a while longer, in the kind of silence that isn't empty, the kind that's completely full and just hasn't found the door yet. Then she stood, said "Good night, Mercer," in a voice that had gone careful, and took her mug and her unsteady hands to the elevator. I let her go. I told myself she'd offered me something, and I'd been decent enough not to grab at it. I lay awake again. Through the wall, this time there was no television, just the specific silence of a person on the other side of it, awake, knowing you're awake too. It was a little before 11 when the knock came. I opened the door and she was standing there in the same blazer she'd worn all day, holding nothing, and she said she'd forgotten her keycard and the front desk wasn't picking up. We both knew the front desk picks up. We both knew she'd had the card in her hand at the bar 20 minutes earlier. She didn't keep the story going for long. She said, "I didn't forget it. I left it on the dresser in my room, on purpose, so I'd have a reason to stand at your door. And now I'm standing at your door and I can't think of a single thing I planned to say." Her voice did the thing then, dropped, just a little, on the last word. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. There's a specific stillness that arrives when the thing you've spent 2 years not thinking about walks up and knocks on the door, and I was somewhere deep inside it, chest tight. One hand still flat on the edge of the door like it was the only fixed point left in the building. When I finally found words, they weren't the ones I wanted. I said, "You don't have to do this. You can go back to your room, and tomorrow we can pretend the bar didn't happen and the hallway didn't happen. And on Monday, we can go back to being the two people who hate each other's spreadsheets. No harm done." I meant it. That was the entire point of saying it. I needed her to have a door she could walk back through. Because I had watched a man put his hand on her that she hadn't asked for, and I was never, ever going to be some quieter version of that. She didn't take it. She stayed exactly where she was, both feet planted on the ugly hallway carpet, and she said, "I don't want the door, Daniel. I've had the door for 2 years. I'm so tired of the door." So I told her the truth, and it wasn't the 3 small words, because the 3 small words felt too cheap for something that had cost this much. My voice came out lower than I meant it to. I said, "Every meeting I have ever walked into, the first thing I do, before the agenda, before anything else, is find out whether you're in it. When you tear my work apart, I go home and rewrite it better. Not for the client. For you. Just to watch your face when it's finally good enough that you can't find the seam. I memorize the days you bring the green mug, because those are the days something at home went wrong and you came in anyway. I built 2 whole years of trying to beat you, because beating you was the only way I let myself look at you straight on. I have read 1,000 documents hunting for the one line that actually matters in all of it. It was you. It's been you the entire time, and I was too proud and too scared to read my own handwriting. She was very quiet while I said it. The hallway lights buzzed somewhere above us. When I stopped, she let out a breath she'd clearly been holding through the whole thing, and it shook on the way out. She crossed the 8 inches of hallway that had felt like a wall all day, and she put her forehead against my collarbone, and I brought one hand up very carefully against the back of her head, the way you hold something you've finally been told you're allowed to hold. Her shoulders dropped about an inch. That inch was the entire story. We stood there breathing in a doorway like 2 people who had each been carrying something heavy for a very long time and had just, at the same exact second, been allowed to set it down. And then, because the universe has impeccable comic timing, a door 3 rooms down swung open, and a man in a hotel bathrobe shuffled out toward the ice machine, saw us, stopped dead, and said, with the deep unbothered wisdom of the nearly asleep, "They keep the good ice on 3. Then, he shuffled on. Nora laughed into my shirt, a real one, finally landing in the right key, and said, "We are absolutely not getting that promotion now." And I said, I could not possibly care less, which was the truest sentence I had said out loud in 2 years. We did not, in fact, get the promotion. They gave it to a man named Phil who color codes his emails and has never once made anyone's chest go tight in a hallway. Neither of us minded nearly as much as we were supposed to. 3 months later, she still read my proposals with a red pen between her teeth, except now she did it on my couch. And the corrections were every bit as brutal, and I had stopped pretending I didn't love being corrected by her. A year after that, her dented green mug lived on my shelf beside a brand new one she'd bought me, so I'd stopped drinking out of hers. which I still did anyway. Mostly to watch her get annoyed in that specific way I had finally learned meant something good. Nothing about us had really changed. She was still sharper than me. She still set things down a little too hard when she was feeling something she didn't yet have the words for. The only difference was that now, when she did it, she was setting them down in our kitchen. Years later, when people ask how we got together, she tells it as a story about losing a key card. And I let her. Because the truth is better, and we both know it. She didn't lose anything that night. She left it on the dresser on purpose, walked 8 inches of drywall in a lifetime of pride to my door, and knocked. She still tells everyone she forgot her key card. She has never once, in her whole precise and devastating life, forgotten a single thing. What would you have done if your rival, the one person you had trained yourself for years to compete with, showed up at your door at 11 at night holding nothing and offering no reason that made any sense? And have you ever called something a rivalry, or a friendship, or anything safe, just because the real word scared you too much to say out loud? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one reached you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.